First, Instructure EdTech night, where we explore all aspects of technology and education. The agenda for tonight, we have Temlett, the coordinator of teaching and learning at Australian Christian College, followed by the founder of Snack, who will be presenting an exciting new app for teachers. Then a short break, you can enjoy some sandwiches and some wraps. And followed by that, we have lecturers from UTS, Agnew and Knussen. Followed by that, we have Sidney Minassian, serial entrepreneur in data and AI. Then we have Mannel, who is an experienced classroom teacher and a learning support specialist. And to get started, we'll kick it off with Sue.
Hello. Thank you for that. Moment of truth.
Yeah.
Okay. For those of you who already teach, you would know that as soon as you want to use technology in the classroom, it doesn't work. And you've got kids in front of you. Do I need this? I'm going to talk about right. Thank you, teacher voices. I'm going to say I don't want my teacher voice, I'm quite good enough. That should be all right. So welcome. I had a little bit of a brief from Cody. I don't know if what I'm going to talk about hits that brief, but we'll see. I'll just give you a bit of a background to me. So my story is I was a teacher in England. I've been teaching about 20 years, English teacher, English high school teacher. And then came to Australia in 2008, worked at a collection of schools. But the schools that I've worked at, I've always been quite fortunate in that they've had a learning management system. And so I'm very heavily into my LMS. So Northern Beaches had Moodle, which is a free sort of learning management system. Then the schools after that, I was sort of leading the charge, putting Canvas into schools. And for the last year and a half, I've actually been a Canvas employee, as well as running the school that I work for on the side in teaching and learning. And then as of last week, I stepped back out of Canvas and I'm just back in my school, essentially. So had a bit of time in the corporate world, experiencing things like Salesforce and the joys of different corporate technology, but really missed the kids. And it's been lovely to be back in the classroom this week. Now, what I'm going to talk about to start with, hopefully won't put you off teaching, but is the reality of teaching. Because if you're going to put tech into the classroom, I really believe it has to be purposeful. And so to sort of look at some of the things that you do as a teacher. And so this slide is actually not meant to be that readable. It's just meant to give you a kind of boom as what you do as a teacher. So timetable dependent, you can be up to 8 lessons a day, back to back, depending if you're in a school where they sort of do short lessons and join them. But maybe 8 lessons a day, range of ages, stages, courses, plenty to concentrate on. And then you have all these different roles. So classroom manager, depending on your school, you could have 33 kids sat in front of you. That was the biggest class that I had in the UK. 33 different needs, most of them would awfully behave in that particular room. So you're managing spot fires all the time. So that idea of classroom manager. Assessor, you're on the spot, assessing all the time as you go. And I think one of the big things that has changed since when I started teaching to now is the amount of recording of that assessment that you have to do. So if we go to the administrator box on here, things like we're doing a big purge on NCCD at the moment in our school, term 2 is the NCCD collection time, National Consistent Collection of Data for any students with learning disabilities. I heard someone's learning support in the title over here. So it's massive time for collection of that sort of thing. Massive time. We're undergoing registration. Nessa's coming out on the 4th of June. So things have hugely grown in how much a teacher has to record what they do. Not that they do it any different necessarily. We have to record it. So there's a lot to do. Content creator, counsellor. You might have things on your radar for that day. A kid comes to you in tears. You're not going to say, actually, I was just about to do my programming. You're going to see that kid, you're going to respond to that kid, and you're going to do that work in the evening. So it's huge. And I know that a lot of you guys are in that kind of first space of going out into the classroom and starting up your teaching careers. And it's a sad statistic that Professor Riley puts out there about new graduates leaving the profession. And I think what experienced teachers really want to see is that we support new teachers and we don't have teachers leaving the profession, because it's a fantastic profession. And it's, you know, there is this reality. I ate my lunch on the drive down today. So fortunately I've made a wrap. So I ate that as I drove down here. So I have not had my lunch until 5:30 tonight. But that might sound a very negative list. But if you let me get to the next sort of few slides, you'll see why we do it. Okay. And so there is a reality to it. There is a lot that you're going to hear when you hit the classroom about how to teach, how to assess. And so this sort of slide, I just tried to put some of the key buzzwords that you hear at the moment. So my school, we look at explicit teaching at the same time as guided inquiry, at the same time as blended learning, and I'm running formative assessment as well. So there are 4 key pillars. But any one of these could be something that your school or schools focus on. And yeah, I've put a few blocks in there of the next latest, because depending on your school will depend on whether or not your principal's like, oh, I read this book and guess what, now we're doing this. And that was one of my old principals. He would read a book, he'd finish it on Friday, we'd take a deep breath, and on Monday he'd go, guess what? And we'd go, Cody knows this because his mum and I taught at the same school when this happened. So you'd be like, oh my gosh, and then it would start again. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can choose from. Same with assessment. So assessment, we obviously need to do our summative assessments because, you know, that's how we report on our students and how we finish up our HSC results and things like that. But along the way, you know, informal assessments all the time. Get some peer assessment in there because that's good for the kids, you know, get some self-reflection because that's good for them to see how they're doing. Boom, 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 and you're just like, whoa, how do we fit all of this into a day? So there's a lot of demands on teachers' time, and I think as you go into that, you want to chuck in technology. This is where I'm kind of getting to in my speech today, that as we chuck in technology, which is a huge thing to do and really worthwhile, you don't want it to be just another thing, okay? We have a little phrase that a Japanese guy who I was working with just last year told me at campus, and he was like, we've got to avoid yap. And I was like, what is yap? I've never heard of yap. And he was like, yet another platform. And I was like, that's perfect. Yes, because, you know, your school have these things, you want to introduce more yourself, you've got to avoid just yet another platform for these things. Now, this is the slide that kind of sums it all up for me, okay? Because although that's huge, and although as new teachers, you're, you know, as experienced teachers, I'm still working evenings, maybe weekends, always weekends actually. But it is one of the most rewarding jobs, I think, on the planet. All right, so I just left it for 1.5 years, and I found myself running youth at church, or helping to run youth at church, because I was like, I miss children. And so there's nothing like, I think, the buzz of being with kids, of having that relationship with kids. So yeah, there's a lot to do, but it is such a rewarding profession. So I just want to encourage you in that. Don't be like, whoa, that's overwhelming. And be like, yeah, there's a purpose to this. It's the most purposeful job I think I've ever done. So that brings us into this intro of adopting tech in the classroom. And for this, I want to bring in the SAMA model. So hopefully through the studies, this isn't the first time you've ever heard of this. It's always stuffs me up when I say this guy's name, Ruben.
It's fun to do it.
Thank you. I was about to do it. Yeah, and he came up with this model, which is, I think when Cody asked me to sort of talk about tech adoption in the classroom today, I always think of SAMA and I always go to substitution. So Ruben, we'll call him Ruben, brought this model together to try and explain how teachers can start thinking along the scale of tech adoption in the classroom. And it's almost like a pyramid scale, so think about the sort of Bloom's taxonomy kind of idea. But at the bottom is substitution, which is basically the way that tech can just replace something that is a resource anyway. So you've got a worksheet, and instead of it being handed out, you've got it online. So the tech's not bringing the learning experience in any way forward. It's just that you're using tech to substitute what you would have done on the photocopier. And I do that 100 times a day because the photocopying queue is huge. I often break the copier, so try not to. I always put it on Canvas because it's quicker and safer for all of my colleagues. But that's a basic substitution. So examples on the screen, you can see replacing that handheld textbook, replacing a paper assignment with just a Google Doc, not a collaborative Google Doc, but just a Google Doc. Using an app to take notes, taking an online assessment, and then just on normal teaching practice, so displaying things on a smartboard, that sort of thing. So that's basic substitution, and that's where I think most of our curriculum and most of our use of tech is today in the classroom. Happy to talk about that if you think that's not the case, but that's what I certainly see in the environments I've been working with. We then move into augmentation, which is where technology is still a substitute, but it provides some improvements, some functional improvements. So this is things like, instead of using a Google Doc, which is substitution, but using a Google Doc with collaboration with other people. So using that Google Doc for group work, that sort of thing. So that's augmenting the experience, adding something into the experience for students. That allows things like sharing digital notes, so you've got your textbook, and instead of just having it online now, you're annotating it. You're using things like tabs to mark your textbook, which means students can more quickly search the things that they were looking for, which means obviously that then the tech has gone to another level. It's not just providing an online textbook, it's providing help for that. And then the next two levels are quite difficult, I think, to access in the classroom. When we get to something like modification, this is where you're actually beginning to take, say, an assessment task and think, how can we really do this differently with technology? So things here would be, I've got an example there, digital notes and students crowdsourcing information to create something together that is then maybe accessible or something like that. And combining that audio, video and text as a presentation tool. And for that, I've got video software in Canvas called Studio, and so it'd be getting my kids to make, say, a studio video instead of me doing. I'm an English teacher. You probably remember those times when everybody in your class stood up at the front and gave the same speech, and by the end of it, you just wanted to be anywhere else but there, listening to the number 30 kid give that speech. Well, if those speeches suddenly become recorded, submitted to a discussion on Canvas, then you're still going to get the same experience. You ask your kids to listen to 3 of them, but it doesn't take over a week to go through that process of listening to speeches. And it's even better because those speeches are recorded for all time. And if you want them to revise that topic at the end of year 12, they go back to the discussion, choose a different 3 speeches. So that sort of thing is modifying what we can do. And that technology there is really transforming the learning, not just substitution or augmentation. And then redefinition, which I think I've seen very little of. It needs to be very, very deliberate, I think, to get to, I guess we were into top way of thinking of redefinition. But this is really where it couldn't be done without the tech, right? So whatever you're doing couldn't be done without the tech. So it's not just enhanced, but it couldn't actually happen without the tech. So when I worked at Barker, we had a suite of AI headsets and stuff. And so there were some things where we did assessment tasks where students were like holding the human heart. And it was gross. It felt like it was pulsating in your hand, and you know the drill. And so they're really experiencing something different that they're not going to experience unless they become a heart surgeon. So it's really redefining what you can experience. And I think that takes a lot of consideration. Brilliant experience for kids when we have that. So in, I guess, the current adoption of tech in the curriculum, I'd say mostly we're still at this substitution phase at the moment. But there's heaps of potential as we begin to move that on. Now, I was fortunate to, unfortunate, maybe not fortunate, but I stepped out of the classroom as COVID hit last year. So I was at home. Fortunately, that when my kid's school was closed, he was working at home with me, but I was working for Canvas at that time. And it was amazing just how many people went, whoa, we need a learning management system. We need something because we've got to deliver online learning. And so sales skyrocketed, onboarding went crazy. You know, people were signing up for different platforms, primary school going into Seesaw, heaps of different things, you know, suddenly accessing, because there was a need to access the curriculum at home, and technology provided that. So I think in terms of EdTech and adoption, COVID has been very, very helpful in getting teachers who were perhaps quite resistant to see that there is a need to have that kind of connection to your students outside of the face-to-face. So my big thing that I drive, I guess, is the idea of blended learning. So I don't like tech replacing the teacher. I think tech should be a real complement to the teacher. And that's where you get the face-to-face and the online beautifully blended together. And that's kind of like my thing. That's why my happy place. So a few bits of advice. I didn't time myself. Maybe 5 more minutes. A few bits of advice as you start your teaching kind of journeys, I guess, into how to bring tech into your classroom. First of all, have a purpose for the tech. So in that idea of that, yet another platform, make sure that if you're going to adopt some tech, you've decided, what is this really going to do in order to benefit my students? What do I want this tech to do for me? Is it supposed to save time? Is it helping me with administration? Is it going to be something where I go back over the results and it informs my teaching, aka formative assessment? Do I purely want to use it for student engagement? Right, so something like Kahoot. Not many teachers are going to take the results of Kahoot and actually analyse them to bring teaching and learning further forward. But should that mean that we don't use Kahoot? Well, not really, because kids enjoy it. So they're enjoying it, it's engaging in their learning, so hopefully taking some of that ideas and it's going a bit further down into their long-term memory. But that's fine to say I want to use this tech for student engagement. But if you're only using it for student engagement, you miss an opportunity to do something with the results. My next one is simplicity, all right? Because this is where I go back to the first few slides where I started off with all that myriad of things you're going to do as a teacher and how to manage it all. If you suddenly decide you're going to use 6 different platforms in your classroom, that's going to add to that sense of being crazy busy, overwhelmed. So keeping it simple. It's so important for you and for your students. If I was to give my year 9, you know, another sort of, even if it was that they just scan their iPads to get the QR code, but if I was to give them one of them for, you know, maybe Kahoot codes, another one for literacy planning or something like that, and then they've got a different one for Jack Plus or for maths, or, you know, it's too much. So keep the tech simple. Is it linked to your school systems? And if your schools don't have a system, then obviously it's a bit more of a free-for-all. But if your school has a system, what do they already use? And how will what they use, how will what your school already has, how will what you're wanting to add to it improve that student experience? So will it drastically transform learning enough to add another platform into what your students are doing? If those questions are yes, is it easy for them to navigate? So are you going to spend most of your time putting out fires, or is it actually quite intuitive for students to navigate? Remember that not every student is tech savvy. Although they're digital natives, we call them, that doesn't mean they actually can do it well. Right? It means that they have tech all the time in their life, they've grown up with it. Can they use it well? And then another big one, if you've got schools that have got, say, learning management systems, they are single sign-on, you've made these schools single sign-on, as beautiful as it is, then can you actually bring whatever it is that you want to use into the fold, so it's single sign-on for your students as well. And then, before you do it, and this is years of experience talking, test it, okay? And then when you've tested it and used it, later on evaluate it. I remember my whole, so 2 years ago, doing an assignment where year 12 standard English had to do a studio video and they had to submit it, and I was going to mark it that way, and we had 60 kids all about to do that. And I set the task, and then one by one the emails dribbled in. I can't download the software. The software was built into Canvas with one first download once you do it. Turned out that download was on the school blacklist, essentially. So we have a thing in schools called whitelists, and you need to make sure that the tech that you want to adapt has gone onto the whitelist and can therefore get past the school firewall. And the firewalls are super important. They're there to protect our students from, outside, from predators, from anything else, and people who want to might get their information. But that was a dog's breakfast, because then we've got 60-year 12s having to catch up with them all. It was assessment time. They had 2 weeks. It took 3 days of that 2 weeks to redo it, to get it sorted, and then I had to give them an extension because it took 3 days of their 2 weeks. Nightmare. And that's just simple. If I'd have just tested that with 2 or 3 students, I'd have known that it worked or didn't work before I even did it. Any tech you want to adapt, you need to make sure that you need to make sure that you've checked its privacy. So again, this is students, these are young people in your care, so you need to make sure that it's super safe for them. And then, having been a head of department for 10 of my 20 years, have you checked with your head of department? Have you gone up the chain to see, is this all right? And just to cover your own backs, essentially, that they know what's going on in your classroom. And then after you've used it, don't just think, oh, that was great, I'm never going to use that again, or whatever. Actually take the time to evaluate the impact that it had on your teaching. Was it just for fun? Did it really assist the learning? Is just for fun okay? And if so, I'd encourage you not to use just for fun platforms once. Like Kahoot, for example. You tell a kid that there's a pin code coming up, they know what to do. And that's because it's sort of become quite ingrained in our secondary classrooms, I guess, and probably primary as well. And then after you've gone through all that, if the tech is going to really support you in your teaching and learning, then it's time to embed it. And I think what's so scary about schools at the moment is, on those first slides when I just said the next latest thing, is that we're not giving time to embed what is practice that we actually want to go forward in. And so if the tech that you have adopted really does support your teaching and learning, then you need to get it into your teaching and learning programs. It's never going to be remembered a year from now that, oh yeah, I used so-and-so, unless it's in the program. So my role is to check everyone's program in the school. And so things like that are stuff that I look for. And things like that, if we're going to actually have an integrated technology program into the school, that's where you're going to have it embedded into your teaching and learning program. And if it's not something that is in your school currently, but you really want to hang your hat on it because it's so good and you've seen such impact on your students, then talk to the school. There's nothing that says that things can't be brought into the fold. So talk to your school about wider use. Use it frequently with students to gain that proficiency. You don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every time you start a lesson. So it is something that you want to be able to say, yeah, we know what we're doing here. Open up, just like I'd say, get Canvas open, they know what to do. And then work with the results so that it really informs your teaching and learning, so that that tech goes back to that super sense of purpose of what you need it to do. And then I've just got 4 things I use really in my teaching at the moment. So I've been a Canvas educator since 2013. It's been a long time for me now. I don't think I could teach without Canvas now. I could, but I don't want to. And so there are other LMSs out there, but Canvas is the one I have been ingrained in and loved. I drive all of my teaching through it. I don't use it as an add-on. And I'll show you what I mean in my next slide. But things like formative assessment, diagnostic assessment before we start units, all of that going through Canvas quizzes so that I've got the data available for me. Canvas Studio for my video tool, and then we're a Google Education Suite school, so Google Docs, Google Slides, etc. I chuck in Padlet. I think there's a lot of value to Padlet. If you've never used Padlet before, give me a nod if you've used Padlet. It's pretty cool. Yeah. So I love Padlet for like the ideation phase, and then Kahoot. I don't use that many Kahoots actually, probably should do a few more, but great for some engagement things. And then I think this is my final slide, and then I'll get off. But this is how I drive my teaching through my LMS. And so this is, I guess, if COVID hit again and I was at home next week, I wouldn't bat an eyelid because it's everything that I've ever done for years, it just goes through Canvas. So years ago when I worked at Northern Beaches, we had a policy every lesson online. So we had to have every lesson online as well as face-to-face. And I remember that being like quite radical in 2008. But then when I moved to Pack Hills in 2012, it was just normal practice for me to have every lesson, some online as well as face-to-face. So I drive my teaching through the LMS. I use what is called signposts. So in Canvas, we have things like what we call module requirements that tells the kids what they need to do with this, and it's like a tick list within there. Check the gas is stopping and doing formative assessment to make sure that you know where your kids are at before you carry on, just like you wouldn't go driving without checking that you've got petrol, and making sure that you know where your kids are at. Having time built in for discussion, so stopping for coffee, having time built in so that you can actually interact with the students, be it digitally on this discussion board or face-to-face. Avoid fatigue by not putting every single thing in a way in which you need to mark it. So online you can have content pages and you can have assignments. If you do an assignment, they're going to submit something and you have to mark it. But if you do a content page and you get the information out, it's purely information, they're going to write it in their books or whatever. Don't do things that you're not going to mark, and don't overdo your marking because it'll kill you. Get them talking to each other, build on that idea of being in the back. Pimp your ride, use videos, studio in Canvas if you're a Canvas user. Group your passages together. So on Canvas we can create groups. So I put students into groups based on their ability and their engagement or their topics I want them to do. So grouping them together. I have a clear direction with my teaching and learning program. And then just to finish, I also enjoy the ride. So there you go. I'm not sure what time I'm at, but I'm happy to take questions. Cody, how long do you have? Any questions? Or we can chat about food.
There you go. I have a question just on virtue of having a ride plane. What does LMS stand for?
Learning management system.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, I think, yes. So you're definitely a subject matter expert. It's really interesting. I feel like whether you're like a new teacher or you've been in the industry for a long time, you definitely have learned something from that chat. And I guess like a little brief intro of what we're doing before. I think this is quite a unique opportunity. You're like being fully involved in the development of something for the classroom. So like we're super early. My name's Cody. I'm the co-founder of Snap. And we're actually still pre-launch. So our product is still getting developed. And tonight, we're just gonna, it's so cool to have like super fresh people going in like to prac. And then like obvious experts in the same place. And at the end, we're gonna have a little Google form to give like completely candid feedback about what we're doing. So like if you love it, say that you love it. But if you see a clear problem with it and you want to flag something to us, that is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than saying, wow, it's so amazing. So I think, yeah, that's what I'd love to open with. And so as I'm going through this, I'm going to go through quick. Keep in mind that at the end, there's going to be an opportunity to give feedback and say whether you use it or not. So just a little bit of intro about why myself and Jake, who's my co-founder, who's watching online, he's actually still in quarantine. He's from the States. So he actually had to go back into quarantine. Long story, really annoying. We can talk about it over some sandwiches. But so Sue mentioned a couple times my mum. So we go to the same church and we all know each other. But my mum has been a teacher for 25 years and she's coming tonight. She's just had school tonight. But she's been a teacher for over 25 years. And during COVID, I watched her spend hours searching for videos and resources online. And this was, they were fully online at that point. And I remember we were actually up on the Central Coast and I just remember watching her like late at night, almost trying to find stuff that would keep her students engaged. And in my brain, I was just thinking, she's trawling all of the, like YouTube and all of the stuff that's out there, but in reality, she knew exactly what her students wanted. But the real problem was she didn't have the tools to quickly make something for them. So being, I'm not a teacher. I have worked in schools, and I think that's why this is such a unique opportunity to hear from people who are teachers. But what we're trying to do with Snack is to make it easier and faster for teachers to make video. And we kind of looked and said, what type of videos do the students like? They like TikTok videos. And why do people make TikTok videos? Because mobile content creation tools have come super far. And that's where a lot of the efficiencies and focus has gone to creating super intuitive content creation tools on mobile. But what's there on the desktop? Like you can go into iMovie to make videos. You can go into, there's amazing tools out there, Animoto and that sort of thing. But if you just wanted to make a short little punchy video to share out that was almost as entertaining as a Kahoot and kept the interaction going, what would you use? There's not much out there. So what we did, and Jake, to put it into context, is a software engineer at Facebook. I am doing an MBA here at UTS, so I was looking for opportunities at this point. So we said, okay, we're going to make and plan a mobile app that teachers can distribute in their classroom. So similar, think Kahoot, frictionless, here's a link, go watch the video and interact. Yes, okay. So first kind of thing, it would start with an image. And we're thinking, okay, you're going to want to break this information into bite-sized chunks. So each one of these things is a byte. And teachers will be able to add their voice and use their finger to guide around this byte. So you can, in just a few taps, add an image from your phone, make it full screen, resize it, think like an Instagram story. You can edit the photos. Then you might want to add text to that resource. So who's that guy? Oh, this is Pythagoras. Okay, you're giving a bit of context. And then, a fun part, you might want to draw on things, circle things, highlight text, underline text. You can, and keep in mind, you don't need an image and you don't need text. You could do a whole byte of just drawing if you wanted to. But this is just kind of showing the potential of what we're trying to do. You might be writing out an equation. You might be just drawing a smiley face and talking over top of it, and we'll go a little bit more into that. Things like this, customization, changing the background color, making it exciting. This is something we're really interested in, adding flavor to it. How are we going to be able to, and these are all suggestions. If you have, I hope your brains are like thinking, okay, this would be cool to see, this would be cool to see. It'd be awesome to see GIFs, it'd be awesome to see this. If I don't mention something, write it down, because it's awesome to hear that stuff from the teachers. So here's where, it becomes different from an Instagram story or something. So you would start recording with your voice over this resource, and you would use your finger on the screen to highlight things. So who's Pythagoras? Pointing to his face, pointing down here. And what that's going to do is going to change your finger where you're touching on the screen to a pointer, so you can explain the resource as you're walking through it. And just, I hope you're thinking of use cases and that sort of thing as well, because that would be good to hear. And then once you're finished explaining it, the playback comes through, and you can see the finger guiding you through the resource. So obviously, who is Pythagoras? That's just one point, and you might say, explain who Pythagoras is, but then you're going to want to add a different thing next to it. You're going to want to expand on that and maybe go into the equation a bit more and add. So then after you finish that one resource, it's going to, add to the next one. And you can see how it starts to piece together and you get different explanations of different things. So who's Pythagoras moving into the equation, moving into an example, moving into an interaction, where you can, you know, ask a question. And then you can also go through to a link. So maybe it's a Google Doc or, and you know, if you swipe across, you can see the different bytes and you can edit them. And I think what's interesting about what we're doing as well, because it's not just standard video, say if you create a video 1 year and you want to change that resource, you don't need to take the video down and re-upload it. You can just edit it and it'll be live instantly because of the format that so this is an MP4 video. It's a different format that we've created for it. What that also means is you might be able to search Pythagoras' theorem and you'll find somebody else's resource and you can go in and edit. So if you didn't like green, you could change that to pink. Or if you didn't like that photo, you could change that photo. And if you didn't want their voice over it, you could add your own voice over it as well. So you can completely customize it in real time compared to a video, which you don't have any access and effect over. And also if you're thinking like, what if students don't have phones? That is something we've thought of. So, you know, that link can be opened in any browser and interacted with in any device. So that might be an iPad, that might be a computer, that might be, you know, the mum's computer and that sort of thing to open a link. And because originally, this is something, Sue, you've really helped us with is, you know, obviously having, and in the US, it's actually illegal for, in some states, for teachers to interact directly with students in a private way. So we were originally going to try and make it so students could use their voice and talk back to teachers, but we've tried to come up with non-identifying ways that students can interact. So that's things like applauding, that's things like asking questions and with their nickname rather than their actual name, which Kahoot does, that sort of thing. And you can see down the bottom corner, that would be the teacher's face explaining things. So then the teacher might be able to reply to questions and edit their original, you know, bytes and change things and react to how their students are interacting with the bytes. So that actually concludes our demo. What I would love for everyone to do just before we go and you know, have some food and break and come back is just fill out, take 5 minutes and go in as much depth or as little depth as you'd like about giving us feedback on what we're doing. Thank you guys. I'll just play some music.
Presentation, but we're just going slide to slide. So we're going to skip over a few things, but importantly, really, we just wanted to sort of say that when we talk about technology and education, for both Lauren and I, we really worry about, and we're both, that is our thing. That really is our thing. But we worry about constantly being shown bright, shiny things. And that's why I was really interested in what you did, Cody. For me, it was not a bright, shiny thing. I sat there thinking, I like this because I use educations and I use explain everything and things like that, but I could see that that would work faster and better for the things that I like to do. And again, as Lauren said, that it would be a great tool for students. So I'd love to see it progressing. But you know, we could have shown you augmented reality, all sorts of things, which are great and fantastic. But we wanted to actually dig a bit deeper and sort of, again, building on, and I'm so sorry I forget your first name, Sue. What Sue was saying earlier, as teachers, you're going to have all of the, and there are millions of things on the web about technology tools, tools for education, things that you should use, things that you should be up with, things that you should know as a teacher, and it's just overwhelming. And then when you've done that, then you start having all the things that you've got to be careful about. So there's all the things you've got to be aware of and how bad it could be, and it's dates of, you know, banned schools in, phones in schools with phones as well, phones in schools, and all the negative effects, etc., etc. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about some of our own research. So this is based on my research that I just have recently completed. And what I did here was to look at what I call what lies beneath. So we know what we see on top. We see you guys and all our young people constantly connected. You're constantly on things. You're this, you're distracted, you're all the things that we talk about, okay? And, my research was to leverage the technology to learn about how young people use the technology. And so we used what was called a person-first approach, where the research went through the young people. I didn't study them. I got them to tell me about their experiences and to show me. So I used Zoom. They screen shared on Zoom. They went into their devices. We used the data that's in the devices. So I used all the data that's collected. They talked about how they use things, etc., etc. So we then started looking at that concept of what lies beneath. And you're welcome to grab a copy of that later if you want to have a look at it. But it was really about seeing that they're polysynchronous, they're socially connected, they're networking, they're able to do TikTok videos and things like that. So that was really important to us because we wanted to get inside and see what's happening inside that child, tween and teenage brain when they're using technology, and that it's not bad, it's not all bad, there's other stuff happening. And I guess my analogy that I would use there, and forgive me if you think it's a bit outside the square, but it's like these young people are using technology all the time. And yes, some of them are doing stupid things with it, and yes, some of them are doing things that are not great with it. But when you see young people who are driving cars, okay, you have young people driving cars, and not young people only, but some people who may or may not be young, who drive cars too fast, or I might be dating myself now, but chuck doughies and things like that. I don't know if I can still say that, but anyway, and I have 3 sons, okay, so I know that. And they do all that. And all people want to do is talk about the bad stuff about what they're doing. But if you look beneath the layer, beneath the surface, they have incredible driving skills, okay? So what they're doing might not be great, but the skills that they have are fantastic. So that was sort of the thinking that led me to doing this research. So we wanted to understand what wired kids are really like, and they are what we call polymediac, polycontextual, and polyspatial. So there are no sort of boundaries. They're asynchronous, they're synchronous. There's the concept of time, space, and place has sort of blurred. There are very few edges there, and they're multi-connected. So these are things that we need to see when we see this young person, instead of seeing, a child who's just connected. So I sort of use like a dichotomous key here, because this is about their tween ecology, and it's not separated from the non-digital world. It just is their thing, and it's what we often refer to as just being digital. It's not about being a particular type of person. They just use their devices as they see fit, when they see fit, for what they see fit. So it's really important that we start to understand that with them. And so this notion of third space, which used to be sort of a metaphorical type of space, which is somewhere between the physical and the virtual, and it's sort of the crossover space. Well, what this research has shown is that it actually exists. And our young people in particular are living in this third space. They're actually, it is their space. It's become what they do. And so I refer to this as their MIMO, or their modus, their mobile enabled modus operandi. So they are often consuming, but they're consuming to create, and they're connecting. So it's not necessarily about what you see, it's about what's happening underneath. And we have to give them the opportunity to do that in an authentic manner. And so, again, you can have a look at some of these responses later, but essentially they just use the devices for what they need to use them for at the time. And I think when we're using technology in the classroom and for learning, we have to allow them the process, and we focus on what we want the learning to look like. So we can step back a little bit from some of those processes, because as one of them said, seriously, I don't know, I just use whatever I need to use when I need it. And another one said, it's just always in my pocket. It's just there. So we want you to be sort of thinking about their dynamic literacies. So we talk about digital literacies, but this is more about dynamic digital literacies that are forever changing. And there is no sort of one specific definition for it. It's constantly changing because they are connected in a way that is their connection through their technologies. And so we're going to dovetail now with Lauren's research, which actually sits on the other side of the research that I've done.
Yeah. So with Annie and I, we often present together because we're kind of coming at this from two different angles. So my research, although I'm not from primary originally, I started looking at early career teachers and how they design technology integrated learning. Now, there are a couple of reasons for this. You mentioned the difficulties and the pressures that early career teachers are under. But in addition to that, research bears out that early career teachers do not have the capacity, or often do not have the capacity, to use technology in their teaching in a really meaningful way. So I wanted to explore that a little bit because, you know, there are often assumptions made, and by schools as well, that young teachers will be whizzed with the technology. But what it shows is maybe on a certain level, you know, comfortable on a personal level with technology. However, when it comes to using it in a pedagogically sound way, that's not the case. So I actually worked with 7 different primary school teachers in different contexts. So the research looked at it in a contextual analysis. So I looked at how teachers approach the design of a unit of work. So from the initial conceptualization of a unit of work right through the teaching, design decisions that were made while teaching, and reflection at the end of the unit of work. And we know that teachers work in a similar way to other design professions. There are a huge range of complex decisions that are made during that design process, hundreds of decisions that are made. And while teaching, even more decisions that are made. So like this all the time. So what I wanted to understand was how the context that they were working in, and that was their own internal personal context, as well as the school environment and their broader lives, were actually impacting on that process and perhaps limiting their capacity in some way. So apologies for these very basic slides. I just sort of shoved them in the last minute this afternoon. But this is just an overview of my participants and what I found. So what I did was I did an analysis that this is the kind of their internal belief structures and experience and knowledge. So that's their affective capacity, their skills. So what was quite clear here, I'm happy to press it because we're working in this area, is that the teachers who had come through initial teacher education where they had explicit exposure to technology integration or digital pedagogies at university were comfortable and confident, and they were actually able to develop units of work that were much more pedagogically sound and really contributed to deeper learning for their students. Now you can see here that I went across 3 different school sectors, so government schools, independent schools, and Catholic schools. Within that, there was a massive range in the access that students had to technology in those schools. So with this school here, Jenny's school in Cybele, Jenny and Sam are actually in the same school, which is very interesting. But they had access to a computer lab once a fortnight. There was a set of 6 laptops, but they were shared between 6 Year 5 classes. And they were in a really heavy trolley. I mean, it sounds really kind of silly, but this is an impediment to Jenny in particular to actually using those devices in her classroom. So I'm glad that you introduced the sound model. Thank you for that. Because what was borne out with this research was I sort of arranged them here in terms of the level of SAMR that they came up with, and I would love to talk all night about fabulous units of work that these particular people created. We're talking about going into Minecraft to design for a 3D shaped maths unit, for example, then reconstructing it in real life. All the time is using stop motion video, and they produce their own videos as their final project.
And that was done in negotiation with the students as well, which was also really interesting to me. The teacher, she was comfortable with not having all the knowledge, and she talked to her students who had BYOD devices, and they made suggestions, and together they negotiated with the school executive as well support that they would use Minecraft for this particular project. But essentially the picture is this. So the two independent schools had very wonderful access to technology. However, what was kind of lacking for them was a little bit of support and the access to actually that knowledge, that kind of technological, pedagogical content knowledge that would help them to develop those units of work. So just move on. This is a whole PhD, so I could talk about it. But essentially, teachers need, and particularly pre-service teachers, need access to that deeper learning, I think, before they go out into their teaching careers, because that depth of understanding and knowledge helps them to navigate what Annie was showing you before, that sort of complex world where you've got this plethora of choices of devices and platforms and all these things. But having that understanding of why it is contributing to deeper student learning is the real key here. And for those teachers who were kind of on the substitution level of SAMR, there was not any great understanding. It was I'll use a video because, well, it's different to a worksheet. And that was kind of the level of understanding. And that's not their fault, but it's just the kind of personal experience, their personal education, and also comes down to other priorities in the school. But as I say, there were two people in my school, so I wanted really wanted perhaps something a little bit more superficial. What we also found, though, because we were analysing the context, was the impact of other people. So it's not only access to technology that could make a difference. So access to technology does not always lead to effective technology integrated learning. Those kind of schools with great access to technology, but the lack of access definitely did create difficulties for teachers. Leadership is really important. So schools that have got kind of, ICT and learning teaching support is really, really great. It's a great resource. That's something that would be great to replicate across all schools. Colleagues' knowledge, this is a really interesting one. So I found that a lot of the people, those teachers at the kind of more advanced end, went into schools and their colleagues, their more experienced colleagues, expected them to be a knowledge source for technology integrated learning, which was really interesting because they might feel that kind of level of responsibility without actually having the knowledge and skills to actually live up to that and to support their more experienced colleagues. And yes, so their perception of students' needs and abilities also influence their design practice. So I guess the key takeaway from this is it's really, really complex. There is often kind of these sweeping statements that young teachers are not, doing this in a meaningful way. What's the problem? It's this problem, it's that problem, but actually it's a really, really complex set of structures. And one of the ways that we can overcome that is doing what we're trying to do here at UTS is providing that quality teacher education. We're constantly reiterating that and trying to look at research and how we can improve it to provide those experiences and get that skill set. So yeah, so that's my research. I don't have all the answers, but it is really important to consider, I think, that context has that role, and we can't bring this down to individual teachers. I guess the same will probably go for expert teachers as well, but yeah, so that's my focus. But yeah, so if we want to move on to...
So I think the thing that we want to talk to you about is going beyond enhancement. That it's not, we sort of prefer not to say technology enhanced learning, but that you're really doing something different. It's not technocentric, it's learner-centric. And the reason I have these pictures here is this is what actually inspired me many, many years ago, before many of you were born. And I was teaching at Holy Family Primary School in Canberra in the 90s. And anyway, so I was loaned a camera like that, one of the first digital cameras. And you may not know what that big thing is that goes into floppy disk. And I was so excited, okay, because I'd always sort of dabbled a bit in technology, but I was really excited about it. And being in Canberra, of course, we have hot air balloons every autumn because that's the highlight of living in Canberra. And one of the hot air balloons landed in our playground. Now, as always, being a primary teacher, out we ran and we all talked to the poor pilot who happened to be there. But I took photos. I took digital photographs. And then I was able to go in, and yes, I had to remove the floppy disk, put it into my computer, and then print them out, and then run all the way down the other end of the hallway and pick up the prints. But what I did changed it, and I think this is really important. It redefined the learning for the children in my classroom. Because what it gave was something for the children to draw from for when of course we wrote about it, because primary school teachers, we always do recounts and things like that. But we talked about our experiences, but the children had the pictures there. Then we were able to make booklets. And interestingly, I was doing some work with some schools in Finland at the time, and I was telling Laura today, I got into trouble because we had a $15 fax bill at the school. Now, you probably don't know what a fax is. But anyway, we had a $15 fax bill, and the principal spoke to me about it. And it was because we'd been faxing things, pictures that the children had been doing, to the school in Finland, and we did little travel buddies, and we had our very first sort of chat where the children were brought by with their parents to my house at night, and we had the doop, very long wait, dial up, and we sat there, and it wasn't live, but it was as live-ish as it could be, and it changed the way I teach, and it basically inspired me to do many, many years going forward in doing that. But I think where Lauren and I want to go with this is for you to sort of, and I'm going to skip over this because we're going to talk a little bit about thinking beyond the ICT part about it. But we want to sort of say to you that if you don't mention technology, you might not use it. But when we talk about it, we talk about still using technology in the classroom. It's just about thinking differently about the learning, okay? Because if we talk about it, then the technology might become centric. But if we don't think about it, then we might not use it. So my suggestion to you is that because there is so much out there, and it is overwhelming. I used to run in Canberra groups that we called latte learning. We also had iPads in the pub, but nevertheless, latte learning. And really, the whole idea of that was that just groups of us would get together for an hour or so. No presentations, no anything. It's not a teach meet, it's not that. We just sit around and we share our ideas with one another and say, oh, I've seen this great app, and oh, I've done this with this. And that's the best professional learning that you can have, is to work with people who are practitioners, who say, I've tried this in my classroom and it did this, and I've tested, because it's the testing is done. And it's a great way of doing that, because we want to inspire you, and we hope that you'll get out there, and some of you will go into schools where whiteboards won't work. So, or you'll have one headset for 33 children, or no headsets for 33 children. Think about hot air balloon landing in the playground, and think about what you can do to make the technology work for you and for the learning, and don't sort of start to try and drive with the technology first. So that's our hope for all of you.
I just want to say that my participants that were in the EdTech system, they actually operate a system similar to that. They often have these get-togethers, particularly for the early career teachers, where they do just meet and sit down and talk about the technology that they're using in the classroom. So, if you're not in a system that encourages that, then it's something that you can do independently. Absolutely. Yeah. And my inspiration was, as a modern languages teacher, was the fact that I was teaching German and French to people who had no idea what German and French people did, look like, spoke about, or anything about the countries. But this is going to show my age as well, explored Second Life. And so people were buying property in Second Life, so my students were going to Second Life, meeting in virtual worlds with real French and German people that they could talk to. And so it does help to solve it and reach those higher levels of the SAMA model. So
Thanks for the opportunity tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Sidney. I'm from Sydney. It's a real thing. So I'm the CEO of Saasyan. I've just joined the company roughly just over 2 months ago. I've been an advisor to this business for over 3.5 years, and I'll tell you a little bit about the journey that we've taken, but it made sense for me to step in as co-owner and CEO of the company. In terms of background, 20+ years of doing different tech ventures. In Australia, Silicon Valley, I moved my family over there. We had our third child in the US and came back. Made money, lost money, been wiped out, come back from the dead, used to be taller, all that good stuff. So very fortunate that I have got to do what I've done in terms of the life learnings and the journey. Really inspired by all the talks tonight, by the way, like wow. And so in terms of the people that are experts already and the new generation of teachers, so thank you. Like as someone who has 3 kids and I'm a passionate my sort of background has included also coaching and mentoring. So I really value what you do and the difficulty of what you do and the complexity now, especially in the school system where resources are short, you don't get to eat lunch and so on. So massive gratitude for what you do and what you're going to do. That you do. My presentation is going to be a little bit different to what we've seen tonight, right? So because we are, our mission or the reason for our existence is student safety and well-being. And there are effectively a couple of core focuses that we have. So we're also applying technology. I'm going to talk about AI, how we're applying AI to help identify cyberbullying, self-harm, suicide, threats of violence and terror. That's on the safety side. When we talk about well-being, we also don't want to be that company that is all scaring people into things. So when we talk about well-being is, how do we help kids become their extraordinary? So with the technology that they use, how do we actually find patterns and align them? And to be frank, my last company, which I built and sold off, was a data analytics AI company. But we were helping organizations like Channel 7 during the Rio Olympic Games sell more advertising. Caltex was a customer. So if you think about how data and analytics has been used to influence people on buying decisions, influence votes in some countries, which we won't mention, why don't we take that same capability and actually apply it to something better, something to protect the kid or accelerate their learning, because we're aligning, because as we said in the research, the technology is just there. My device is just there. It's easy to do what we do. And so there's no turning back from where we are, right? And so we can't take an old school approach to safety and well-being when the world has moved on and we've got digital movement. So let me tell you about a few little things, and then I'm actually going to give you a bit of a demo of our product. So we're looking at cyberbullying, self-harm, threats of violence and terror. And it was an interesting the company's been around for a bit. I started advising when we were very early, but today we've got 400,000 kids, 600 schools across Australia that we provide our product, and it's called Assure, right? And we've got a number of private schools, Catholic schools, a number of individual public schools that have got the permission to do their own things that have come to us. And about a year and a bit ago, we landed the whole of South Australia public school system. So all the schools that are in the public system are now covered by Saasyan and Assure. So it was a massive deal that we closed through Telstra. There was our product along with Cisco and the firewalls and everything, which we'll talk about. I loved Sue's reference to, was it yet another platform? And so our sort of philosophy in the way we've done this product, so, I'll talk about some of these things that we do. We do the monitoring, alerting, and we're looking for searches and what happens in email and things like that. A couple of important things. One is, whatever I'm about to say, we're not the ones collecting the data. This data is already being collected on the school network. So it's already on there by the firewall, it's already in your email systems, it's already there in Canvas and the learning management systems. What our job is to do 2 things. One, for the teachers and the wellbeing leaders, is to help them find the needle in the haystack. What are the conversations that need to happen today or this week because they're urgent? And on the other side, we know all schools have a shortage of ICT resources. And so what can we do to make it super easy so that IT people are not overwhelmed with yet another platform that they've got to manage, right? So with that philosophy, we actually integrate with all, not all, but that's where I'm taking the company, with many of the leading technology products that are used in the school today. So we connect into the identity management system. So we can identify, is it the teacher, is it the student? We've got all the firewalls that we connect to, right? So because that's next generation firewalls are important to defend and protect outside attacks happening. And you know, the productivity tools like Office 365 and Google and the learning management system, and I'll show you how and why that makes sense. So we've got a Canvas integration and so on, right? And now, while I talk about all of this, and we think like, and I've looked at this globally, so I've come into this company and why isn't this all over the place? Why aren't we the next Australian success story globally? That's all good. And we're doing cutting edge AI and blah, 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 blah tech. So what? No one can say they've got student safety and well-being fully figured out. No parent will say my child is completely safe. No principal will say everything's fine at my school. No government will say everything's fine in the country or in the state. So part of our vision for what we're doing is we're saying we need to do more of this, but let's use technology and scale it. Like why, like we've got a great group here today, but why isn't this 10x, 100x, 1000x audience? So with that, we're launching the Safe Village community, where it's all about student safety and wellbeing. And feel free to go on the website, sign up. Like literally, it's where we're going to bring teachers, school IT people, principals, wellbeing leaders, parents to come and share stories, share insights, learn, get inspired, and know what to do. So when I got appointed this role and I updated my LinkedIn, I got a lot of people contacting me going, wow, what a great cause. And one of the ladies, she comes, goes, Sid, just yesterday, my 8-year-old daughter came home and said, Mum, what's suicide? I wasn't prepared for the conversation. So we've got all these little nuances around what you do, what we do from the tech side. And I'm like, yeah, great, we're going to keep doing that. But there is something bigger here from a mission perspective where we're saying we're going to put this together. So I am going to, by the way, Helga is one of my new colleagues that's joined us this week. So please make yourself known. So she's also new to the country. So she's arrived from Finland. And so we're, either I or her will be reaching out to some of the speakers tonight and say, hey, we'd love to feature you in the Safe Village. Like your research, your insights, your stories, your know-how is so valuable for global audiences, right? And so we'd love to do that. So no, that's a little bit of context and background and so on. So love to give you a bit of a highlight of the product. And I'll talk to a few things that Sue mentioned that was fascinating. Okay, so remember, we're just sitting there and looking at all the data that's already collected in the school. And what we're trying to do is to raise awareness where there's concern around kids, like for example, and this is the stuff we pick up. I tried to cut myself last night. What do you do with that? Video alert, right? Or I'm vomiting again. Is there an eating disorder issue? Or you're not funny, stop posting. Okay, so what's that? Who does that go to? Type thing. And then there's other things like, well, how much of your time, like you're in maths class, why are you watching a YouTube video to do with Fortnite or Minecraft, for example? So things like that where it's alignment to well-being, you know, safety and well-being. So when you log in, you've got this dashboard. The minute we set the system up, it actually, because the data's already there, it starts giving you all these insights. And based on your profile and security, so if I'm a Year 8 teacher, I only see the Year 8 things. If I'm a well-being teacher for a house, and you might get this, some schools have this concept where a house runs across the years, right? House red, 7, 8, 9, 10 will have people in house red, for example. I'm their well-being leader. I might get a view or a report. And based on who you are, it's a bit like your phone, you can customize this to prioritize and have the widgets that you like, that's important to you. So if I'm in fact in wellbeing, I want to see the language alerts that went off based on you know, triggers, or the systems assessing potential risks. So a bit like a credit score, we're getting, there's some activity and behavior here that looks like concerning. Someone should go and talk to this kid around bullying or self-harm, and so the filters are there. And then some of the IT people like our technology, because immediately it shows the heavy web usage, where websites they've gone on, and so on. Now, one of the things that Sue mentioned was, right, through experience, told the kids to go and download a thing to make videos, and that video site was blocked. And when schools are implementing next generation firewalls to protect sometimes this happens. So we've learned that, and one of our features here is allows you to go and do a open up, and you might say, yep, I'm the Year 8 teacher, I'm about to give a piece of homework that will allow them to watch a YouTube channel, and go and open this up for the next 45 minutes, so that, and I created a rule override. So whatever the firewall said, I can create a rule override. It allows that. Or there's another feature that says check. So you can actually just check if you've actually got access before I create the homework task. So do the kids have access to that? So because we've been working so closely, we're going, well, how do we make the lives easier for the teacher, the IT people, and again, the well-being of the students? So a little bit about the way, and a little bit on the techie side. Some of you might enjoy this, on how this works. Usually these firewalls all have what they call as web categories. So everything on the web has got automatic categories, and is it like a harmful site? Is it entertainment? Is it education? Is it pornography? Is it adult content? Is it arts, and so on? And so these come right through, and what the schools are able to do is to say, well, yep, that's the standard categories that exist on the web, so for videos, for websites. What's our risk assessment of them? And so every school can say, well, we think, this drug category, for example, is, and you can create your own settings, right? It's a high, medium, average, whatever, so you set it, and you say, do I want to report on this category? So for example, is it something that we care about? Because remember, there's so much, well, not web, but there's so much data there. The goal is to help find the needle in the haystack, not create unnecessary alerts and false positives, right? So they can set that, is it reportable, and is it available to my rules engine? That rule was the one that I overrode, the firewall. Now, let's take a scenario. There might, like the school might say, let's use nudity. Nudity is blocked. But I've got a Year 12 arts teacher that wants to just show a snippet of a YouTube video that has been tagged, that has some nudity, but it's art related. That might be something that we will allow the teacher to do. So we'd say, okay, in these scenarios you could. But pornography under any circumstance will not be allowed in a school environment. We don't want to set up tools that someone could override, teacher or otherwise, right? So there's these kinds of things that we've had to consider and learn and implement over the last 5 years that this product has been out in the market. So we've got that. Now, the next part is really interesting, which is a dictionary of words and phrases. And this is where, with the words and phrases, we, when we deploy this, there is a database that comes with it with words and phrases, and each school can keep adding new words, so new emerging words, like who heard of the Momo challenge? Anyone, Momo challenge? Okay, so kids were doing some crazy things and people like Momo, whatever. So you can add Momo challenge in this. Now, what our service also does, and we're just implementing this now for our next release, is crowdsourcing. Because we've now got 400,000 kids, 600 schools. Well, if one school's picked up Momo challenge, why are we waiting for someone to trip over before the next school recognises that in a week or a month? So the school can say, yeah, I want to get the updated crowdsourcing terms, whatever. If another school picked it up, just give it to me. I've got no time to eat. I've got no time to go and just add these words. We'll get these updates. So again, we're thinking, what do we do to improve the user experience, right? For the teacher, for the well-being leader, protect the kid constantly. This is the first level of defense. The second level of defense is we've got this fuzzy logic AI that says, yeah, we know kids are smart in the way they spell words. So here you can see I've used the first spelling, there's got some S's in there, right? However, what if they're getting more creative? We can't keep adding every variation. So the fuzzy logic looks at near term or representations of that word and goes, I reckon they're having a go at that other word. Like they're trying to spell addict using B's the other way or something, right? So they're being cheeky or tricky. So it picks that up. And the third layer is full-on natural language processing, which is every word that you look at individually is safe, but put together creates a context that is concerning, such as, you're not funny, stop posting. Now, individually, those words would not have triggered anything in the dictionary, but in that context, that's a bullying statement. Who's the bully? Who's the victim? Alert goes up, someone can go and have a chat, someone can counsel the one that's being bullied, someone can counsel the one that is doing it. So all of this that I'm showing you, there's actually not much setup to do. So one of the things that people love, and I'm pushing even harder as when I've come in, I've gone, right, our design goal is a non-IT person should never have to log into this. Imagine if all you're getting is an email that says, Sue, you need to go talk to Cody because of these 2 reasons this week, right? And so that's what it does. Now, you can understand how this is now from a setup perspective, how it's set up. Now, what we've got, a couple of very cool features. So one is alerting. And so on the alerts, again, very tailored based on your role in the school. So I only care about E-rate. I'm the E-rate wellbeing person. I want to look at, let's say a drug category and call it self-harm. And this will automatically run from midnight to 11:59. I'll say, do I want to be notified immediately? Yes, no. Now, this is again where we're trying to apply some intelligence to say, maybe the teacher said, go and do research on drugs. And so the whole class is searching for drugs. So if that's the case, we're doing a cohort analysis and say, at this point in time, if it spike up for everybody, probably okay, we won't, versus, no, there's one person's doing it. Or, for example, the frequency. Like maybe I was on watching TV and I saw an ad for Black Dog Institute. So I went, what's the Black Dog Institute? And I searched. Versus 5 times this week, I was on the suicide hotline website. Different reaction. By the way, all these references that I'm giving you is real data that has come from, like from the schools that are in, Saasyan, this is what the product called for us, like the little scenarios. So, and this will then, you just set up the email, and it emails you, and this is the bit where I'm saying no one should really have to log into this. We're doing the intelligence and the hard work from the back end, and we're just going, look, one conversation over here, go have it. That's it. Don't spend time logging in, trying to figure out how to use this system and so on. And then after that, the reports, like once there is an incident and the school has to do some investigation, this comes into its own, right? So because all the data's there, we can pull up all sorts of information. So you can see, we're looking at, okay, web activity by period. So we can say like it was in the arts class at this time that something happened. Here's how much web usage there was. When did the dictionary and those word alert, those phrases alerts go off, right? And what was it in relation to? What applications have they been using? And something else that we've got here is this rating concept that I said. So it's almost like that credit score. We're looking for healthy digital citizenship, okay? So during school hours, they're using productivity apps, or if they're using YouTube and research, we can see that it was cohort relative, not outside of that. There's been no profanity or no bullying activity, so that will show a positive thing. You mentioned Barker before. They're a customer, and they're using some of the data that's available to then do some analysis against also academic performance. So they're looking at trend of activity, and this is where I'm in on the wellbeing side, right? So how can we nurture you to move back in the right direction based on your digital citizenship and activity, right? All the way to the searches you took, the videos you watched. So you're able to have a conversation and the unfortunate things, right? People searching for cocaine will get put in jail for things and what. And these are all real terms. These are real search terms that we've anonymized the who, but the data is real. So look, that's basically it. So where we are today, we have 400,000 kids, 600 schools. I think our journey has just begun. Our mission has just begun. We absolutely have a global ambition. There's not many businesses where you can say truly we're serving an awesome purpose. So this feels so good that sort of my career of doing data analytics and my care for humans sort of has intersected. and also I'm looking to surround myself with like-minded people. So for example, Helga, one of the things that stood out with her, I mean, she got the role in her own account, absolutely, because she shared how she had to apply 15 times to get into Australia. So I was like, I'm looking for a resilient, strong woman. Bang, we've got one. But for example, she comes from a line of teachers, like her mum's a teacher.
Both parents, my sister.
And this is, so again, like back to the kind of company we want to build is just have, if we're truly going to serve this mission and this community that we're saying, then we need to have people aligned, and it's not about the money alone. It is a venture, of course, but we have to be right on mission. So very excited.
Who's your, so you mentioned teachers will just get alerts, but I'm curious, who have you designed this for? IT departments or sort of team leaders? Like where does this sit in, I guess, the stack of the school decision-making system?
Yeah. So Cody will tell you we've got 5 personas that we take care to serve, but ultimately it's every school now has some variation of a wellbeing director or leader, right? So that's sort of the hierarchy person who has to care about the kinds of things that we're talking about here: cyberbullying, self-harm, suicide, threats of violence that need counselling. And then under them, there's usually teachers who've got full-time teaching roles plus a well-being responsibility, like a house leader or responsible, something like that, right? Yep. So from the well-being side, they are the focus. Now the principal just cares that the school has something, right? But they're not really, I think when we have success stories and my Safe Village, once we start launching interview shows and things like that, I'm sure we're going to feature a few principals who go, yeah, well, you need to do this all the time. And it's all good, but really the people that are pulling the weight are the well-being leaders. And then of course the other side is, because this absolutely touches the whole IT stack, it's the IT manager, ITC manager, director of the school. They've often got an innovation director title person who looks at how technology is being adopted, and on the flip side of it, what are the safety considerations they need to make around that. So they're the audiences we serve, but what we're trying to do is raise the awareness of this. So we're imagining, so we've already had more than one occasion where parents have discovered the school's got these kinds of reports, and they're like, A, can we get a copy? B, why can't we do this at home? And we're saying, no, we're not in the B2C market, we're not in the home market. But for example, parents care. Parents care that what are their kids watching during, or what are they doing online, or how, yes, the phone is so available. So how are you, we know we can't control them at home. Good luck with 1 versus 30 in the class. What's happening? So I think, and we will keep staying on this, like, how do we make this accessible in a painless way, painless to the IT manager of the school, for the parents, like, because we're seeing more and more demand come through that. Please.
Do students in the school know that this is in operation in the background? Like, do schools choose to make it public?
I'm too early in the piece to know, to be frank. I'm now starting to reach out and having invitation conversations with principals and wellbeing leaders and things like that. What we know is that and given I've got 3 kids in school, I know sort of every year they have to sign off on the internet usage policy. Yeah. And in there it says we're collecting information, we collect data. And with the way this is designed, there are no 2 schools that will ever see one another's data or anything like that. So each school is separated. We absolutely have to comply with all that. And not only, so I think now that we've got 600 schools, sort of they trust us and the government and whatever. So from an architecture perspective, compliance and data privacy perspective, it's done in that way. And then I think the kids do know, because what happens is when the report comes up, they pull it up and then they have a chat to the kid. Yeah. And so they know, they do know there's alerts there. And I think you were mentioning a little story at the beginning.
In our school, we've got, I'm not sure it's you, we've got something similar. And last couple of weeks ago, principal had to go into this classroom because Year 9 were doing a science lesson, looking at the big blue booby bird. And it's a thing. It's a real thing. There was a worksheet that came with it, but the principal got a ping, and so he's like, oh, okay. Went down to the classroom, got the kid out there and realised there was like 20 more kids all doing this. And Andrew, the science teacher, was like, I'm so sorry, it's a thing. It was a thing, but yeah.
So I think back to that your question, I think they do know that they are it's being used.
How is it accessing the data? Where does it work? How is it accessing devices and things like that?
Good question. So there's many people that have attempted to approach this problem, and one way others have done it is to actually put an agent on each device and whatever. It's very intrusive. We don't do that at all. We're basically saying if the kid has logged on to the school network, anything that goes through that firewall, we're picking up everything the firewall's already cleared. Yeah. If the school kids decided to log on to Microsoft 365 or Google on the one that the school's provided, we've got to connect it to that, and we're connecting data off that. Right. What they do when they're hotspotting, what they do when they're at home, we're not seeing, and that's a gap, to be frank. But back to the 80-20, something has to give. We rather this kind of cleaner design where we're not intrusive, we can scale it, we can swap things out, we're not tied to any technology as such. We can go, okay, if you change your technology tomorrow, no problem. Whereas I think the one that is at the current school that actually they're looking at us to replace actually forces them to use one specific firewall, which has very specific limitations. Because if they had the cohort feature, they would have known 20 kids are searching big bird. They're searching big bird. Question.
Is there a way to avoid it through like incognito mode?
Not if you're going through the Wi-Fi. Not if you're going through the network. So incognito mode won't sort of keep a record on your thing, but it still has to access the internet. So if you've gone and you've logged on to the server, then you've put incognito mode on the browser. Too late. Like that machine already identified as you anyway, right? So and then the next layer is the internet. And again, like obviously you can't hide what you're searching on the internet. It's on the internet. To get to the internet, you have to go through the firewall. So that incognito is your mum or dad not finding out, looking at your browser history, really. But the service provider knows about it, and certainly if you've logged on with your identity, or even on your phone, if you've used, and a lot of kids do because they want to save on data, but a lot of people don't, they use Wi-Fi where they can. It'll identify. So it's only if they hotspot, which means I'm not going on the server, I'm just using another data access point, is when they can get around it.
Do you have any data about how often that happens? For example, can you see a pattern of someone dropping off their Wi-Fi and then going back in again?
That's a great question. We don't, because we are not the providers of that. Remember, but the people, the school, the IT people in the school and their service around the firewall and who's accessing the server should see that. So once they've accessed it, that's when the data is created. That's when we just go, oh, here's all the data that's created. We'll sum it up for you and put it in those dashboards for you.
It doesn't take long for high schoolers to figure out, oh, we'll just go to our personal dark web.
Totally. Yes. So it's by all means not a perfect solution, but given the literally the number of lives this has saved and what it does from a conversation perspective or a bullying perspective or things like that, it's back to, life is all about trade-offs, as is any design.
Go along those lines, if you were doing your cohort checks and you saw that your cohort should be 33 and you're getting 25 every time who are only showing up in the data, well, you have 7 or 8 students who are potentially hotspotting frequently. So I guess then you might not be able to identify every time who they are, but you certainly be able to have those right conversations and say, we know who's not going through the system and your responsibility. Yeah,
but just flag it with your parents and just say, look, it may not be anything.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, beginning of the class, there were 30 pings happening, and then halfway through the class, there's 25. So that would be the indicators. We're not at that interface part, so we're not seeing who's logged on or not. We only get the data that got activated while they're in. So if there's 5 people at home sick, we don't know whether they're hotspotting or they're home sick. But yeah.
Another question. Have you got data on student feedback on what they think about this? How do they find it useful? Do they think it's intrusive?
We haven't.
Yep.
And certainly something we should look at. Yes.
I'll just speak to that. I imagine they'll say they find it intrusive, but I think that's where, as the adults in the room, you have to decide it's in their best interests. And it shouldn't, if you're not doing the wrong thing, it's not intrusive.
And I think tying into the research that I did, that if the young people are part of the conversation, because part of my research was looking at their device management, and some of them would, say, some of them felt that adults didn't have the right to, manage their devices, but a lot of them actually said, look, I understand why we have these things, and I don't necessarily like it, but because we have these conversations around it, I understand why. And I think that having a conversation with the students is probably paramount to that, making it part of it. You know, like this is for your safety. This is part of our
So the sort of combination of what all of you are saying, a real powerful upside down way of looking at this is, like it's my right, why are they looking at what I'm doing, blah, 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 blah. And you say, what if you've got a little sister or a little brother who's at the end of the bullying and just hasn't yet built up that resilience and courage or the language to speak up to anyone, and next thing you know, what about them? Wouldn't you want someone to have gone and had a chat to them because they saw they were the victim of bullying or they stopped the bullying? And so when you think of it that way, when you flip around and not make it selfish but selfless, and it's about, you know, it's about others, then I think, but there's all perspectives are valid. Like, so, and as I'm saying, this is imperfect and it will continue being imperfect forever. I know that. And so that's what partly why I'm also very passionately pushing the safe village. Let's bring in, it's like, see, you need to be talking to the students, get feedback from them. Yes, thank you. Or think about it this way about hotspotting. Thank you. Yeah, we need this input. And that's why, I would encourage.
That's great.
Awesome. Thanks for hearing us.
So we did have a good speaker, Slutty Krishna, who could come and serve in the same kind of last moment way that he spoke. So I texted my mom and was like, hey, you use technology for learning support, which is what Janae was going to talk about. So she's very kindly shown up. She's got lots of interesting things to say in her slides. But, that's right. It's about I'll respond to you.
Can I go? I have all time.
So since this is very impromptu, I'm not going to deliver too much, but I've just kind of been reflecting as I've been listening to everybody. I felt like, there were a few things that I thought about that haven't been maybe looked at. So first of all, I guess I wanted to speak to new teachers who are coming into the profession. So I've been teaching for 12 years, just got my first permanent position this year. But one of the things around technology and coming in as a new teacher is that, as one of the presentations indicated, is that you're going to come into a school culture and you're going to come in as the new person and you're going to feel desperate to fit in to that school culture. So when it comes to technology, which is always pushing the edge, and you'll find in a lot of schools that the culture isn't that eager to be pushed to the edge continuously because people are really tired. So, you'll find yourself needing to kind of pick and choose where you're going to decide that you're going to push, and it should be an area of your personal passion. So, if it's technology, that's great, but if it's something else, technology can still be kind of an integrated part of what you do if it supports what you're doing, if it saves you time and energy, because your time and energy are going to be the thing that you must protect as teachers or you will not make it through the profession, full stop. So in terms of how to influence, yes, there are official influencers. There's the technical ICT person who manages all of the technology of the school. But probably more importantly, there are individual pockets of people who, just because of their aesthetic values or because of their personal interests, whatever the case, they've latched onto a particular piece of ID. And they're using that in a brilliant, brilliant way. And so you need to look for the people that are using technology in an inspiring way, because honestly, every classroom I've been in, for the most part, has a smart board. That does not mean that the quality of the education has been influenced in any way whatsoever. So, Janae, who is going to come here and speak, she is somebody who led me into technology. So she has continuously set an example, and not in a look at moi sort of way, but in just an incredibly functional way. There's nothing she does that isn't well designed, that she hasn't put lots of good thought into, and there's nothing she puts together that has anything there that's there for no reason whatsoever. So when COVID hit, I knew I could go straight to her and she would save me so much time with the Yap, yet another platform. I knew I didn't have to waste my time because Janae had already been there and she'd scouted it out for me. And I said, I've always wanted to, but now I must make a website to communicate with parents the content of what I do with maths and reading. So she was able to just tell me, do not waste your time, go straight to here. Here's some examples with some things that I've put together, follow my mark. So I did. So COVID was just the best experience ever for me as a teacher. I'm sorry, I know it was really hard for a lot of people, but I have not learned so much probably since I had my first child. So it was massive. I mean, I had 3 days, not your fault. I had 3 or 4 days where I don't think I've ever worked so hard in my whole life. I mean, I didn't stop. I didn't stand. But it was because I had a vision in my head of, what it is I wanted to achieve, because I wanted to make sure that the students I supported in the school did not miss out in any way whatsoever. Like, I didn't really see that we could throw our hands up in the air. So a lot of schools during COVID, their student learning support officers, their teachers' aides, do you know what they did? They cleaned and dusted shelves in schools. My SLSOs didn't clean or dust a single shelf. So what we did, and it was the simplest thing ever, so I'm not a leader in technology, so I'm not going to try to be. But all we used was PM online readers and Zoom and phone calls. And I and 3 SLSOs, we supported 80 out of 600 students with daily offerings of one-on-one reading. And not only was that helping the student, it was coaching the parents. So while we were doing these sessions, the parents would say, oh, I see what I need to do, or I can see how, they were learning themselves, and we were also checking on well-being. So it was an opportunity to just check in, and make sure everybody's okay. And sometimes talk to parents and just spend 45 minutes talking to them about what's going on for them. So that's not a lot of technology. So I wanted to share with you some of the ways that I've used just the simplest little things. You don't need a smart board, but one of the things that I did even just last year was I got my IT guy to help me just put my iBooks onto the screen. And then I bought the class novels. And I've used iBooks in the past anyway, because you can highlight vocabulary words. And they always read blue back in year 6. So once I've gone through it once, I've already got all those vocabulary words marked. So I would pre-read with them so they'd heard and learned those vocabulary words. When the class read it together, they already knew and they were participating in stuff. But the experience of putting an iBook on the screen with letters this big, and we are all looking at it together. So it's like enjoying a movie together or something, because it really did give them that focal point. And for the students I work with, this is remedial reading, and these are students that are low confidence. And for us to be able to all work together, we're all looking at the same thing, like an old-fashioned big book, but even better, So, and we could go back and we could review vocabulary words because they were already highlighted. And anyway, so that was, one thing that I wanted to share. I know there's something else. Photographs. Just photos on your iPhone. So powerful. So here's how you use it. But the idea is that never fall in love with the technology, because as a teacher, you want to be in love with the learning. Just seeing the light switch on, anything you can do to make that happen. So with photographs, it's just so powerful. So number 1, behavior. You have a student who's struggling with their behavior, but they're in the middle of a really positive session with another student. You photograph them with permission of parents. You photograph them having that positive experience with that student, you show them the photograph, and then you send it to their parents right then and there. And you ask them, what message do you want to say to dad? And it establishes, I'm in touch with your parents. I do have them on speed dial, and we all love you very much. So there's power in that, but also in math in particular, I really used my photographs quite a lot. They love to work on whiteboards, but you can't keep the work. How do you assess? You photograph them standing there with a whiteboard and a big smile on their face. And you share it with their parents, yes, but you also print it out and they glue it into their maths book with their maths work. So it creates a narrative of themselves as mathematicians. And it's simple, but they love the photographs of themselves. And it's just, those books were such a treasured item for them, you know, at the end when they had all of their drawings, all of their work with these photographs. It also helps them review because that's a nonverbal. So if you have students with speech, language, and communication needs, they need nonverbal stimuluses that are going to tap in, kind of like what you were talking about with your app. A really strong visual element that's going to help them tap directly into the concept they were doing that day. So you can keep it as simple as you want. It's not what you're using. It's not whether you're using the latest app. It's not whether you know all about the technology that someone else in your school is using. It can be that, but it doesn't have to be that at all. So, and I guess the last thing I wanted to mention about the great uses of technology is just being able to research something when the window is open. So yes, Google, but we don't want to talk about Google as a source of information. We're in a university. We want to talk about good sources, bad sources, all of that. But when someone is just wondering, where does cinnamon actually come from? You're not going to get another moment to answer that question, and it can model a genuine love of learning. You know, you're modeling it for them, you're giving them the satisfaction, you're giving them that endorphin hit of instant gratification, but it's still educational. So those were basically some of the things that I wanted to pull out as really simple things. Yet another platform, yes, I had platform burnout during remote learning, and I don't call it COVID time, I call it remote learning because I really, really hope that schools will not throw away all that work and wonderful creativity that's been built up. So for example, using Zoom, I'm continuing to use Zoom because now I can meet with parents and they don't have to come to school at 3:30. I can meet with fathers. And the import of that is huge, especially in primary where I am. So, but mostly I guess the idea about so when I was reading up a little bit just this afternoon thinking, oh my God. And when I kind of Googled this topic, what came up was these bombastic kind of newspaper articles about, will AI replace teachers? And I thought, won't replace me, because you have to think about what is education? What does it mean? What are teachers? What does that mean? What does it mean to teach your students? If you feel robotic in your teaching, if you feel like you're churning, if you feel like you're ticking and flicking, then yes, AI will replace you. But that's not what teachers do. Teachers look at students, they see their students, they reflect, they think about their students at 2 o'clock in the morning and they get a really big idea. And they try it out the next day and they watch really carefully to see, you know, is that the right idea or not? AI is never going to do that. And if it does, then they can have the job. So I think I'm just going to leave it like that, short and sweet. But thank you for letting me speak here. I'll say I am a graduate of Macquarie, and I always wanted to be at UTS. I'm 2 courses away from my master's. I'm like 2 courses away from that extra degree. I think if I said doctorate, it would probably.
Oh, just don't say it.
Yeah.
I just say that I really love the examples that you gave because that is exactly what redefinition is. And I was lucky enough to actually work with Ruben Pontaduro when he was developing that Salmon model, because I was working for Apple at the time. And that's the whole idea, is that it's actually not about the technology, and these guys have heard me wax lyrical about that many times. It's actually about what to redefine the learning. And the Zoom is perfect. It's such simple technology, but what you did was redefine the entire learning experience for the child and for the family.
Yeah, it's open new opportunities.
Absolutely. And I think that's what I hope these
I
new
will say
teachers
though, I
take
think
away.
about that SAMR model, I think it's a bit limiting sometimes in the way it's presented, because it implies that you have to achieve the S before you get to the A sometimes. I mean, actually, the way you presented your data was not that way, because you showed that some of them were kind of in the middle, but not hitting the bottom bit.
Yeah.
But I guess what I was.
See, it wasn't intended to be.
No, not at all.
It was meant
Not
to
at
be
all.
just a reflection tool where you could go on any given day and go, oh, I've done some things here, and I've done some things here, and I've done some things here. And it was never meant to be, and it's become SAMR, which means bottom to top.
The learning curve is really difficult because when you invest, and that's the problem, guys, when you're learning new platforms, it's going to take so much time that you are now invested in that platform, and you're unlikely to throw it away if it doesn't work. So you need to pick and choose very, very carefully what you invest in. I mean, if you've got nothing but time, I mean, you can do whatever you like with it, but you need to think, is this something that I could invest, that I will reap the benefit of for the next 3 to 5 years? If not, is it really, really worth my time? And you have to ask yourself that, not just about technology. Anything you embark on, if it's just for today, just for this week, just for this year, my advice is don't waste your time. Don't waste your energy. Don't burn yourself out, because you'll get heartbroken after a while. You'll pour your heart into the school garden, and then all your parent volunteers will go away, and then you won't be able to maintain it, and then you'll become bitter. And we all become a little bit bitter, and that can be fun, but you just need to just pace yourself. Pace yourself.
And it's hard when you get attracted by the bright, shiny things that are doing this to you.
Yes.
I think it's hard.
Yeah. And at the same time, there's no need to be, phobic. I mean, we all are living with technology. Why would we pretend that we aren't? I've always wondered about all those old iPhones that are sitting around in people's homes, not used, and could we just have them at the school and use those, even just for photographs.
Or recording kids reading.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's an amazing thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you for taking the time, everybody.
No, thank you. All right, thank you everyone for coming. On behalf of EdTech, we would like to, again, thank you all for coming, and thank especially our expert speakers. Thank you, that was a really great insight that I could use all of that on my cyber discipline. So thank you for that. So I should get sense of consideration for organising you. But no, a big thank you. On behalf of EdTech, we would like to present you a trip back to represent us, but also to say thank you for your time, and for your expertise and time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I think there's still a bunch of food, and we also have some crack packs for really anyone. So mingle, take a crack pack. The tissues are crying.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.